the United States has announced a sweeping suspension of immigrant visa processing for 75 countries effective next week. But what does this mean for the global community? With this directive, the US is signaling a tougher stance on immigration, specifically targeting those it deems likely to rely on public benefits once in the country. The pause, coming just months before the US co-hosts the 2026 World Cup, will affect visa applicants from countries like Somalia, Brazil, and Iraq. But as we dive deeper into this freeze, we must ask, is this a necessary step to protect American interests, or is it a move that leaves millions of hopeful applicants in limbo, questioning their futures? Stay with me as we unpack this decision, its motivations, and the ripples it will create both within the US and across the globe. This is where it begins. The suspension of immigrant visa processing for 75 countries is more than just a policy change. It's a dramatic shift in how the US approaches immigration. While the focus on public charge or the likelihood of immigrants becoming dependent on public assistance isn't new, this freeze marks an escalation. The US State Department's directive halts decisions beginning January 21st, giving officials time to reassess their immigration vetting procedures under existing law. The move is framed as an effort to curb what the Trump administration describes as the exploitation of America's generosity. But behind this rhetoric lies a broader question. Is the US prioritizing its economic stability and national security over its role as a global leader of opportunity? Or is this just a step toward closing the doors to the world? Let's explore how this directive intersects with the evolving global landscape and what it could mean for international relations. To understand the significance of this visa freeze, we must first examine the broader context of US immigration policy. Historically, the United States has prided itself on being a land of opportunity, welcoming immigrants from all corners of the globe. Yet over the past several decades, immigration policy has shifted, particularly under the Trump administration. The introduction of stricter vetting processes, including the public charge rule, is rooted in an older system designed to prevent individuals likely to depend on public welfare from entering the country. This policy is grounded in the Immigration Act of 1882, which prohibited the entry of public charges, though the criteria have evolved over time. The recent freeze is a direct response to growing concerns about immigrants potentially draining US resources. But the timing is telling. Just as the country prepares for the World Cup and anticipates an influx of global visitors, the US appears to be tightening its grip. So what triggered this latest move, and what is at stake? A sudden shift in policy often breeds immediate consequences. For the US State Department, this freeze is already stirring tensions internationally. Immigrant visa processing for 75 countries will be paused, leaving thousands of applicants in a state of uncertainty. Countries like Somalia, Russia, and Iran, which already face strained diplomatic relations with the US, are now further sidelined. The timing of this move also raises eyebrows. Just months before the 2026 World Cup, a global event that promises to bring millions of visitors to US soil. The irony is palpable. As the US prepares to open its doors for one of the biggest international sporting events in history, it is simultaneously closing them for many seeking to settle permanently. This contradiction intensifies the scrutiny of the decision. Are we witnessing a calculated political move, or is the US simply trying to reassert its control over who gets to enter its borders? As this crisis unfolds, the world is watching, and the stakes could not be higher. To understand the true implications of this visa freeze, we need to look beyond the surface. The Trump administration's focus on public charge is a nuanced, often misunderstood mechanism. It's not just about limiting the number of immigrants entering the US, it's about controlling the kind of immigrant that the government believes will not burden the system. This policy draws from a legal framework established by the Immigration and Nationality Act, which has long given the State Department the authority to prevent immigrants from entering if they are deemed likely to become dependent on public benefits. But what does this really mean in practice? For many, it creates an invisible barrier. If you cannot prove you won't require public assistance, you are denied entry. It's a subtle yet powerful way to shape who is allowed to build a future in the US. The freeze itself may seem like a temporary disruption, but the underlying logic of these policies will have long-lasting effects on immigration patterns and the broader narrative about who deserves to be a part of the American story. As the political and diplomatic tensions around the visa freeze continue to escalate, another storm is brewing. The second mini-crisis lies in the internal US debate over the ethical and economic implications of these actions. On one side, proponents argue that the freeze is a necessary step to protect US resources, ensuring that immigrants who enter the country contribute to its prosperity without relying on public support. On the other hand, critics argue that the move undermines the very principles of American democracy, creating barriers for hard-working individuals who only seek a better life. Among the most vocal critics are humanitarian organizations, which warn that the freeze will disproportionately affect refugees, asylum seekers, and families attempting to reunite with loved ones. The consequences of this policy may go beyond the realm of international relations. It could harm the global perception of the US as a leader in human rights and opportunity. With this second wave of crisis unfolding, the true impact of this decision on America's standing in the world may take years to fully reveal itself. For the millions of individuals caught in this freeze, the impact is personal, profound, and potentially devastating. Imagine a family in Somalia whose members have been waiting years for their chance to reunite, or a skilled worker from Brazil whose visa application has now been put on hold indefinitely. These are not just statistics, they are real people with real hopes and dreams now facing an uncertain future. The emotional toll is heavy as applicants are left in limbo, their futures hanging in the balance. For many, this decision feels like a rejection, a denial of the opportunity they've long worked toward. And beyond the individual stories, there's a broader question: what message does this send to those who look to the US as a beacon of hope and opportunity? At this moment, it feels as though the dream of building a new life in America is slipping further out of reach for too many. The US may be shutting its doors, but the world is watching, and the consequences will echo far beyond this one decision. While the direct consequences of this visa freeze are felt most acutely by those seeking to enter the US, the ripple effects extend far beyond American borders. This policy shift could strain relations with several countries, particularly those whose citizens are now impacted. Countries like Somalia, Iraq, and Nigeria may find themselves facing diplomatic tensions with Washington as their citizens are effectively shut out from pursuing new opportunities in the US. On the global stage, this freeze contributes to the growing narrative of nationalism and protectionism sweeping across the world. As countries close their borders to protect national interests, it threatens to destabilize international cooperation on issues like trade, security, and migration. The freeze also casts a shadow over the upcoming World Cup, with millions of fans across the globe eager to attend. While non-immigrant visas remain unaffected, the US's broader approach to foreign visitors now raises questions about the country's role in the international community, especially when it comes to welcoming those who seek more than just temporary entry. As we look ahead, the question isn't just about the immediate consequences of this policy, but what it means for the future of US immigration and global relations. Let's consider three possible scenarios. The optimistic scenario: the US successfully implements its new immigration policies, creating a more controlled, effective system that protects American resources and interests. This shift could lead to improved public support for immigration reform, with the system more focused on high-skill, self-sufficient immigrants who are more likely to contribute positively to the economy. However, this vision would require careful balancing to prevent damaging the US's reputation as a land of opportunity. The middle ground scenario: the visa freeze causes temporary tensions with several countries, but over time, the US finds a way to resume visa processing while maintaining stricter standards. This compromise would ease international tensions while still addressing concerns about public charge issues. The US retains its global influence but faces more complex diplomatic challenges. The pessimistic scenario. This freeze leads to a prolonged diplomatic fallout, with key allies in countries becoming disillusioned with US policies. The continued restriction on immigration could result in a decline in global goodwill and reduce the US's leadership role on the world stage, especially as other nations adopt more open immigration systems. In the end, the decision to freeze immigrant visa processing for 75 countries is a stark reminder of how immigration policies can shape not only national identity but also international relations. This move is more than just a temporary policy change, it's a reflection of a shifting global landscape where nations are rethinking their roles and responsibilities in the world. The US is at a crossroads, balancing its need to protect resources with its legacy as a beacon of opportunity. The question remains, will this policy enhance America's standing in the world, or will it isolate the country, casting aside those who once sought to build their lives on its shores? For those impacted by this freeze, the future is uncertain. But this moment in history offers a crucial lesson for all of us. The policies we embrace today will shape the world of tomorrow. Now, more than ever, we must ask ourselves, what kind of future do we want to create? The world is watching, and the choices we make now will echo for generations. Stay informed, stay engaged, and as always, question what you're told. This is just the beginning.